all times, and that's probably true. Okay, so this is data from my co-author Andy Guess at NYU, looking at a near representative sample of Americans who provided consent for sharing their online web traffic data. Okay, and there's two plots here. I'm going to talk you through the differences between them. What he's doing is he's looking at the estimated slant of the media outlets they visit in terms of websites. Okay, and the slant estimate comes from the average ideology of the people who share these sites on Facebook. Okay, so it's from an article by some Facebook data scientists. So what you can see in the left panel is that the average person's average media outlet is quite centrist regardless of party. Okay, so the average person is not seeking out a steady diet of skewed partisan information. Most people don't care about politics that much, especially outside of a campaign context. This is 2015 data. Okay. But what you can see in the right panel is that the distribution at the audience level, in terms of where the overall set of traffic is going by party, looks very different, right? That's where you're seeing that big partisan polarization between the kinds of sites Democrats go to in the left in blue and the kind of sites that Republicans go to on the right. And there's a smaller set of folks on both sides of the aisle who are consuming large amounts of information disproportionately from like-minded media outlets. Okay.
Could you read the labels on the news sources?
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, from left to right: Daily Kos, the Huffington Post, and the New York Times. CNN just to the left of the red spike. MSN is on the middle. There's still a remarkable number of people who go to the main portals like MSN and Yahoo. And then on the right, Fox News and Breitbart. So I mentioned this to you earlier about the role of Facebook. Here's some partial evidence that's consistent with that. I might or might not have more information about this. I can talk to you in a non-recorded format. What these economists, Alcott and Gensko, found is that fake news sites were differentially likely to have been reached via social media. Okay, so you can see in the bottom bar here, more than 40% of their visits originated in social media compared to only about 10% for top news sites. Okay, so it seems to have been a really important traffic driver. Search, a smaller traffic driver relative to top news, but a non-trivial one, right? About 22% there. So in terms of fact-checking and its role in countering fake news, one of the problems was that no one really expected this. And so the fact-checkers weren't on top of it as a target for fact-checking. They typically have focused on elite statements made by politicians, party members, right, the president, members of Congress, people like that. And the only exception, for the most part, was Snopes, which focuses more on rumors and hoaxes, which fake news seemed to fall more squarely within. But even still, I would say that everyone was caught off guard by this. Okay, so now there's going to be more fact-checking of fake news. I think it's fair to say. And the question is, how effective will it be? And I just want to, so just raise some questions that you should think about as you think about how effective these kinds of approaches might be. Okay. The first one, as I mentioned to you earlier, is that the people who read fake news may or may not actually see a fact check of it. Right? It's entirely possible to have a world where those are two disjoint sets, okay, or ones with very little overlap. Okay? And so we should worry a lot about the extent to which the fact checking of fake news that's being done right now is reaching the people we'd like it to reach. The second point is I would just encourage you to be very specific about what you mean by the effects of fake news. This is something that people talk about very loosely, and I think it's often, fake news is being used as this kind of catch-all term for all sorts of misinformation, and people are making sweeping claims about its effects that I don't think are well supported by the facts. So in the case of fake news, you'll hear people say fake news affected the outcome of the election. I don't think there's any evidence for that in terms of changing who won. Okay. It's very difficult to show that. You'd have to make very strong assumptions. That Alcott and Gensko article I mentioned walks you through the kinds of assumptions you'd have to make to get to an outcome like that. Similarly, fact-checking itself may not change that many votes, right? Even if you've if you've read a fact check that changed your mind about something, did it change how you were going to vote or which party you preferred? Probably not. Right? So we have to be realistic about what fact-checking can and can't accomplish. Right? And then finally, I would just encourage you to think about misinformation in general and not focus on fake news to the exclusion of this larger problem, which is a much more systematic one than these particular sites that have popped up that are wholly fake.